All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, putting a cap on Big 12 Media Days. We got Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football. So for the next several hours, I'll be going live with various bloggers, broadcasters, and writers to discuss Media Days and the state of the program, the team as we head toward fall camp of 2019 here in just a few weeks. Jason, appreciate you stopping by. How are you doing today? It looks like it's bright and sunny behind you.
Yeah, it is. It's probably about 95, 97 here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So good day. Good day. Thanks for having me on, Mark. It's once media days start, it's kind of the unofficial official start of college football season. So we're excited to get it cranked up.
I think it's just flat out hot everywhere. I'm up here in Connecticut, known for its brisk winters, and it's going to hit triple digits this weekend.
Gosh,
So it's just
yeah,
hot everywhere.
that's right.
Jason, I'll leave it wide open in regards to three or four pretty important topics that we just discussed, and you
Yeah.
briefed me on in regards to Big 12 Media Days, and I was able to catch Lincoln Riley's comments as well.
Yeah, Mark. I mean, I think as we mentioned, I think Lincoln Riley in his third official year as the head coach now, he's become quite the expert from a coach speak perspective. He doesn't provide a whole lot of nuggets, a whole lot of information that kind of we in the media like to hear about. I think primarily a lot of the discussion was around Jalen Hurts and essentially why hasn't Lincoln Riley, number one, why didn't he bring him with him to Big 12 Media Days, and number two, why hasn't he announced him as the starting quarterback now? So a couple of things I think kind of go into that. First and foremost, really the reason why he didn't bring him is that's kind of a hard sell to the rest of your team. You have an individual in Jalen Hurts who came in. I believe it was in February that he came in. So he's been with the program all of about 4 to 5 months, and to bring him in over some seasoned players that had been with the team. Some that are seniors that have been with the team, been through some of the wars in the last 3 or 4 years, might have been felt as a bit of a disrespect. But obviously, as Riley has done, and then currently did here at the Big 12 Media Days at Jerry World, he was very complimentary of Hurts, specifically from a leadership perspective. I think it's pretty evident that he came in spring and pretty quickly won over the locker room. So I don't think. I mean, it's much like the Kyler Murray, Austin Kendall situation from a year ago. I don't think there's too many people that are um, will be shocked, will be surprised when and if Hurts is named as the starter. When September 1 comes around for in Houston. But one of the things that I know that me and you have talked about, kind of the face of the landscape of college football, is sort of the free agency that we know as the transfer portal. So I think we'll probably see that, Mark, as we evolve the way the transfer portal is I think you're going to see coaches shy away from naming starters until they're well into fall practice, just because of that. You're one injury away from a essentially at Oklahoma, at least, you're one injury away from a true freshman who's just been on campus since June, or a redshirt freshman who in Tanner Mordecai that could be there. So I think all with that being said, also with the kind of the nature of the way the transfer quarterbacks, specifically at the quarterback position, has happened more than any other position, really. You want to try to, as a coach, I think you want to try to certainly keep those people happy, keep those folks engaged, so that they don't look at transferring, and really think that both Mordecai and Spencer Rattler have an opportunity to win the job come fall practice time.
Yeah, if there's anything that's somewhat demoralizing for a competitive person, and we're talking about ultra competitive people, alpha dogs, it's that the decision's being made for some other reason, not let's go out on the field, let's see what the deal is, regardless of what you did last year or what you did or what the star rankings and recruiting say. Let's see who the best player is, and this is the way an organization of this nature needs to be run. Now, there are certain considerations to be made, but for the most part, that's the way it should work in every industry and so forth. And
Yeah.
certainly, this is where it's just laid out. Hey, we got three guys. We go out there and play, and certainly there's an evaluation to be made that requires some opinion, but it's pretty easy to see generally over time who the best candidate is for the job, and that's what these guys go to school for, most of them. And if not, they now have an avenue to run off somewhere else, and then
Right.
the competition is a little bit less steep so that they can get on the field.
Yep.
Talking about transitions, I think the one that is one of the more intriguing across college football, not just with Oklahoma, not just in the Big 12, concerns Alex Grinch coming to Oklahoma, because I've got a number of Ohio State folks that I talk to on a regular basis that follow the team or right there at practice each and every day. And we know what Alex Grinch accomplished at Washington State. He took 2 and 3 star athletes and he took them from a bottom 10 or 15 defense in the country to a top 30 defense in the country. It was a remarkable turnaround. He went to Columbus, and they just maybe had the thought with Urban Meyer that they just stockpile like coaches on both sides of the ball that have these huge resumes that actually, in Graciano's case, was an NFL head coach. That's just going to be the magic wand. But with Alex Grinch, I don't know that he necessarily had enough say in what they did defensively. Now that he's cut loose and he's back to a reclamation project, maybe this is his best situation to show what he can do again.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mark. I mean, to your point, there are some coaches that have that niche of more of being more of a reclamation project type of coach, coordinator, as opposed to what you mentioned at Ohio State. And yeah, I mean, I think some of the people that I've talked to as well, especially when Grinch came on, there was a little bit of concern just in the way the Ohio State defense played last year, with that being his first year. And I know the dynamic was a little bit, maybe a little bit awkward with, to your point, with him and Chiano kind of being co-defensive coordinators last year. But no, I mean, I think the points very, very eloquently made from a Washington State perspective. 2 and 3 star players, and no one plays good defense under Leach, right? I mean, his teams have been obviously certainly a offensive powerhouses, and he's definitely an offensive innovator. But then, what he did in just a short time, bringing Washington State into a top 10, top 20 defensive team was certainly remarkable. Obviously, the hope is that he can do the same thing at Oklahoma. I mean, you have to think that he's probably got better players at Oklahoma than he did his first year at Washington State. Maybe they're. And I think this year helped going to answer the question, right? I mean, I think when you talk to a lot of people around here, the question is, was it a talent issue, or was it the coaching issue with Mike Stoops, and then in the past, and then obviously Ruffin McNeil filled in for him for the last few games of the season, but the defense questionably got worse after that. So I think a big thing with that's happened in the spring, and then we'll see early on, certainly in fall, is how do the players buy into his system, buy into what he's trying to do, along with some of the new the new coaches that he's brought on staff. Do they? I mean, I think that kind of the age old thing, it can't get much worse than what it was last year. I think people that expect Oklahoma to automatically be a top 50 defense this year, probably not necessarily going to happen that quickly. However, in the Big 12, I think it's more of a yardage doesn't really matter a whole lot. I think it's more about points and turnovers. And one of the things that he has historically done very well is forced turnovers. So if Oklahoma, I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 turnovers that they forced last year. Very, very small amount. Maybe it was closer to 9. I can't remember the exact stat, but they were among the league's worst, and then also they were last in passing yardage given up in the country itself. So with the team, with the way the Big 12 is set up, it makes it makes itself it lends itself to improving on the pass defense side of the ball, our side of the defense, as well as forcing those turnovers. Those turnovers obviously bridge a a super offense like that Riley has had over the last 2 years, this being his third year, and then obviously the years that he was a coordinator before that, offensive coordinator under Bob Stoops. But yeah, I think that's critical. Even if I think you'll probably get some invigoration in the team in terms of a new leader, but how he's able to morph that team will be very interesting, specifically as they get into conference season this year.
Jaden Hazelwood and the other five-star wide receiver, Theo Weiss.
Yeah.
Do we expect them to get much playing time and be factors this year?
That's really an interesting question, Mark. I think a lot of people talk about that. The receiver room is loaded. It's pretty clearly the best position group, probably on both sides of the ball, that Oklahoma has. And of course, you have CeeDee Lamb, that is an all Big 12 receiver, All American, potential receiver this year. You have Lee Morris, who's kind of that tight end position, along with Grant Calcaterra. And then you have an individual named Nick Basquin, who's been in the program for a few years, who got his fifth year of eligibility this year. So then you bring in, to your point, Jaden Hazelwood, you bring in Theo Weiss, and then you also have another five-star receiver in Trajan Bridges that has come in. So I think all three of them will play. It'll be interesting. I think Riley and the offense will use the first couple of games to kind of interchange them and see where they fit in the best. I think Hazelwood was probably the highest recruited guys in some institutions, or some publications. He was the number one receiver in the country. Theo Weiss not far behind. Weiss had a really good spring game along with Trajan Bridges. Hazelwood was nursing a bit of an injury in the spring game, so it didn't have as good of a spring game. But at the same time, you certainly would expect all three of those guys to play in some capacity this year.
So that question came from William Lee as I surveyed the live chat room here. We got Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football. We also have a question coming in from 904 Hurricane regarding with the change in defensive scheme, how that affects the linebacker positions and who you expect to come into play both in the middle and the outside.
Yeah, so I think that's another very interesting question. I think there's been some thought around moving Kenneth Murray outside a little bit. Now I think that decision may have been made for Alex Grinch when Caleb Kelly had the ACL injury in the beginning of the spring camp, so he may not be available. So that might kind of change Grinch's thought process. I mean, one name he was a local guy here in Oklahoma. Levi Draper is a kind of a guy to think about. He was one of the best linebackers not only in the state of Oklahoma but the country coming in. He's not been able to see the field. Not sure why that's been the case, but he's not been able to kind of to make a mark and make and get on the field. What was interesting is I think OU just released their kind of the weight difference in terms of what players have gained through the summer conditioning program, and Levi had gained 26 pounds. That's an astronomical amount for a linebacker in a short period of 3 months. So, I think a lot of people around here are certainly pleasantly surprised. I think he may be in a position where he can, kind of play in the middle and let Kenneth Murray fly outside. The other one that I would bring, that's certainly I would very much expect him to be in a starting position, probably for Caleb Kelly here in 2019, is Deshaun White. Very highly recruited kid, was a long time commit to Texas A&M, kind of flipped pretty late in their recruiting process last year. So he was a true freshman, played on special teams a little bit, but Alex Grinch and a lot of the defensive side of the ball, from a coaching perspective, they raved about his speed, his athleticism, and his open field tackling a lot in the spring. So I certainly would expect, Deshaun White and Kenneth Murray are probably there. I think the most interesting, part will be where does Do you see someone like Levi Draper come in? There's another individual by the name of Brian Mead who played really well in the middle in the spring game. So I think that'll be one of the most interesting position battles on the defensive side to take a look at.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, with a live stream featuring Oklahoma football. We got Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football. We certainly appreciate his contribution. And if you want a full analysis of Oklahoma offense and defense, Jason joined me a few weeks ago, and we posted those videos. So a full preview of the Oklahoma offense and the Oklahoma defense. And of course, you can join Jason at Last Word on College Football. Woody Washington, Jaden Davis, two of the premier cornerbacks coming into the fold, top 25 at their position in the past recruiting class. We've got a comment and just basically an overall defensive backs question coming in from Revington on the live chat. Jason, if you can give us an overview on the DB situation.
Yeah, you mentioned Woody Washington and Jaden Davis. Woody Washington seems to be poised to challenge at the cornerback position. So obviously, I think you got Trey Brown, who's pretty much cemented at one cornerback position. So I think you're probably looking at a battle between probably between Parnell Motley and Woody Washington. Jaden Davis will probably get in there as well in that from a cornerback perspective, but. Parnell Motley, he's been, his career, specifically the last couple of years, have been riddled with inconsistency. He's played a couple of years ago. He played extremely well against Ohio State, had a pick in that game in the victory in Columbus. But then, his problem has been, Mark, over the last couple of years, just his ability to make a play on the ball when it's in the air. So, he's got to improve in that area. As you mentioned, Willie Washington coming in as a true freshman was, his stats last year. He was a 4-star guy. His stats weren't, necessarily what you would expect. But when you read into it a little bit, look at some of the videos and do some research on him, he was hardly ever tested. So there's a reason. I think a lot of times at the cornerback position, you don't get a lot of balls thrown your way. I think that's a good thing. So I would expect. I wouldn't be surprised to see Parnell Motley start the season just because of the experience that he has within the team. But Woody Washington should be there, hot on his heels. I think that the competition will certainly be spirited. If you want to go talk about it from a safety perspective as well, kind of looking at the secondary, Jeremiah Cordell, he was up 13 pounds from, I think he came in about 189. So I think he was just right at 202 here, kind of post summer conditioning. So I think he was a big get. I mean, I think that we talked about this last time, Mark, when we talked about the defensive improvement. There was a video that was leaked of Riley and Cale Gundy and the defensive staff that they were incredibly elated when they got him this past year. So, would certainly expect him to be a staple in the defensive secondary as well.
Always enjoy the conversation with Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football, so I encourage you to jump on over there. Last Word on College Football for your college football needs. And Jason Ray features Oklahoma, joins us on a regular basis. And again, we've got our Oklahoma offense and defense previews posted, so please check those out. Lincoln Riley made a comment, and maybe I'm reading between the lines unnecessarily, but he did talk about that even though the standard is to win the Big 12 championship, get to the college football playoff, and they're always about winning championships, and that's the goal every year. That doesn't change. There is a recognition by the coaching staff and by himself that certain teams are more primed to do that, and others will need some development, and the opportunity may not be there. I'm paraphrasing very much, but he did, give some considerations to. There are years that aren't necessarily down years, but not the optimal year to win a college football playoff. I don't know that he was talking about this particular team, but it seemed to be a comment that he made that he didn't necessarily need to make because of the offensive line changes with 4 prime players moving on, with the quarterback change going from what we've talked about, the very best quarterback in the country, and that's arguable, but the last 2 could certainly be considered the best versus maybe a top 15 or 25 best. And with the defense not being fixed yet, is there more of a sense of vulnerability among the Oklahoma fan base and maybe the actual football program this year for a championship this year?
Yeah, I think you're right, Mark. I think there is probably more of a sense of vulnerability, specifically because you don't know what you have at the quarterback position. I mean, you know what Jalen Hurts brings to the table. You don't know how much he's improved. He looks like he's improved a lot from a spring perspective, and then obviously how he played in spot duty last year, and then certainly as he came in the SEC championship game. But no, I think that's certainly a fair point, and he's Riley's hedging his bets just a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you. And we just released a kind of a way too early 2019 Heisman piece where our staff had ranked Jalen Hurts as the number five from a Heisman perspective. So, and I wrote in that piece that I'm not sure if that ranking is more about Lincoln Riley's ability to pull in transfer quarterbacks into a Heisman Trophy winner very quickly, or if it's more about what Jalen Hurts we've seen from Jalen Hurts in the offseason, and then last year as he morphed a little bit as more of a downhill or a downfield thrower. That was his issue, and essentially that's why he got benched in favor of Tua, was just because of the downfield passing game wasn't quite what it needed to be at Alabama. And absolutely, to your point, Mark, I mean, it can't be undersold, the four new offensive linemen. Beanbo as the offensive line coordinator, offensive line coach for Oklahoma the last few years. He has constantly produced a winning offensive line, and it kind of remains to be seen if that position is simply an area where they reload, or if there's going to be some learning curve early in the year. How that goes. Thankfully, as you look at the schedule, it's not incredibly tough early in the year. Houston, they're going to come in with a pretty good offensive team with De'Aaron King and Holgerson kind of running the show there now. UCLA, not sure what you have there. And then as you get into conference season, Texas looms in October. So there might be some time for the offensive line and for Jalen Hurts to jail a little bit. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there's probably a little bit more vulnerability this year than we saw the last couple of years. But at the same time, I don't think anybody from a media perspective or just kind of talking to people knew exactly what anybody would have in Kyler Murray next year from an Oklahoma perspective. So he came out of nowhere. I think the thing that Kyler Murray had as an advantage that Jalen Hurts doesn't, as he had been in the program for 2 years before he started. No, Riley has only had Jalen Hurts for 3 months, and will end up being about a 6-month period before he, if he is the starter, before he makes his first start. So, doesn't have the longevity, but I think Riley had mentioned that he was, maybe a little bit more prepared than Kyler and Baker, just because of what he's been through and what he's seen. But I think a lot of people are high on Texas this year, and for good reason. Every team has their certainly in the Big 12 and nationally, every team is chasing Alabama and Clemson, but at the same time, Texas has to replace 8 starters on defense as well. And then they have a big, second week of the season tilt with LSU. So, I think certainly the vulnerability is there, but it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of manifests itself early on in the season.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. So everyone, here's the deal. Too many conversations today to turn around. Therefore, we're going live. I think many of you enjoy that. We've got about 31 on the line right now watching us currently. But because of the volume of people that will watch later, which will be in the thousands versus the number of people watching right now. I've decided to do separate live streams so the people that want to watch Oklahoma can watch them, Virginia Tech, Clemson. Otherwise, I would do one long live stream. So for the people currently watching, I understand it's a bit of a pain, but I'm ending the live stream right here because this will process and post as an Oklahoma video and so forth and so on, with Virginia Tech coming up in just a few minutes. Actually, we're 2 minutes late for Virginia Tech, but that's fine. So please just hang right here on the YouTube channel. Keep it right here on the front page of the Mark Rogers TV Voice of College Football YouTube channel. And we'll be right back with Virginia Tech football talk in just a second, as quickly as I can turn around the live stream links. Jason Ray, last word on college football. Please join him and the rest of the staff right there. Jason, we appreciate you stopping by.
Okay, thanks for having me on, Mark.